Democracy tells you a bedtime story. It tells you that you choose, that you decide, that your voice shapes the world, and your hands steady the future. It tells you that the system listens, that the system cares, that the system is built around the fragile architecture of your beliefs. But Machiavelli would whisper something colder, something the modern world tries desperately to hide. A society cannot survive on truth. It survives on the illusions the people cannot afford to lose. Not because rulers are wicked, not because citizens are foolish, but because truth has a weight that would crush the spirit of any ordinary person. If people saw the real nature of power, its negotiations, its contradictions, its quiet brutality, most would retreat into fear or anger or apathy. So instead, they live inside a carefully woven dream. The dream that their voice matters equally, that their choices shape history, that the world moves in harmony with their hope. And yet, the system does not run on hope. It runs on perception, on stories, on rituals, on illusions softened enough for the mind to carry without breaking. The truth is heavier than any citizen can lift. So democracy gives them something lighter, something gentler, something beautifully false. Not a lie imposed by rulers, a lie requested by the people. Because deep down, everyone already senses the truth, but very few are willing to live with it. And that is where the illusion begins. Every society builds itself on shadows, not because it loves darkness, but because shadows hide the things that would terrify those who demand simplicity. Democracy tells the citizen, you are powerful. But behind the curtain, the machinery whispers, you are needed to believe that you are powerful, because belief is the thread that binds society together. Not strength, not logic, belief. Without it, the system collapses into chaos. People imagine they want truth, but truth is not gentle. Truth does not soothe. Truth does not adapt itself to human emotion. Truth is the cold sculptor of reality, unmoved by fairness, unaffected by hope, untouched by the pleas of the powerless. This is why Machiavelli argued that illusion is not deception. It is governance. It is emotional architecture. It is the bridge between human fragility and the harshness of the world. Democracy must give people a version of reality they can live inside without drowning in the impossible complexity of how decisions are really made. Most people cannot handle that leaders are constrained, that choices are compromised, that ideals are negotiable, that morality bends to necessity. So the system creates a gentler script, a script in which every vote is equal, a script in which every voice matters the same, a script in which the collective will is noble, consistent, rational. But no crowd is rational, no mass is consistent, and equality exists only as an aspiration embroidered into the story. Yet people cling to it because it gives their suffering context. It gives their frustrations meaning. It convinces them that patience is noble, that endurance has a purpose, that their struggles fit into a larger moral framework. Without that illusion, society would become a battlefield of isolated individuals, each convinced that their fear and anger must be acted upon immediately. The modern citizen is not protected by freedom. They are protected by the illusions surrounding freedom. Illusions that slow down panic. Illusions that dampen rage. Illusions that transform a chaotic population into a manageable one. To remove these illusions would not enlighten people. It would destroy the emotional structure that keeps them participating. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. People do not follow truth. They follow comfort. They follow identity. They follow the story that hurts the least. So the system becomes a storyteller. It paints the shadows in warm colors. It frames limitations as fairness. It sells compromise as virtue. It turns uncertainty into optimism. And the people accept it, not because they are weak, but because the alternative is too heavy to bear. The greatest illusion in democracy is not equality. It is the belief that the truth would make the system stronger. It wouldn't. Truth would shatter it. People do not rise when illusions break. They fracture. They splinter. They turn against one another. They search for meaning in darker corners. They stop cooperating because the story that justified cooperation has collapsed. And without cooperation, democracy dies. This is why illusions are not moral failures. They are survival mechanisms. They hold society together in ways truth never could. They stabilize a world that would otherwise spin in panic. They protect people from the psychological weight of understanding how fragile everything truly is. Every citizen walks through life guided by shadows, softened into shapes that resemble hope. And behind those shadows stands the quiet architect of belief, not a ruler, not a government, but the universal human need to live inside a story that feels safe. Democracy does not survive because people choose truth. It survives because people choose comfort, and comfort is always built from illusions. The crowd believes it thinks, but crowds do not think. They feel. A single person can be intelligent, reflective, cautious. But once absorbed into a collective, that intelligence dissolves. Individual reason melts into shared emotion, and emotion becomes the true ruler of society. This is the part of democracy most people refuse to acknowledge. The will of the people is not born from reason. It is born from appetite. Appetite for safety. Appetite for belonging. Appetite for purpose. Appetite for meaning wrapped in simple words. This is why Machiavelli insisted that a leader must never follow the crowd. He must understand the crowd, its fragility, its volatility, its desperate need for a story that tells them who they are. Crowds are terrified of the unknown, so they cling to symbols. They worship simple explanations. They obey narratives that feel comforting, even if they contradict reality. They follow illusions because illusions reduce the unbearable complexity of the world into something they can carry in their hands. No leader can govern a crowd with logic. Logic is too quiet, too slow, too subtle. Emotion, however, is a storm, loud, fast, and eager to be swept in any direction that promises clarity. This is why every democracy must become a manager of emotion before it can claim to be a manager of policy. The system must teach the crowd how to feel, and more importantly, how not to feel. The people must be guided away from panic, because panic seeks destruction. They must be guided away from despair, because despair seeks escape. They must be guided away from rage, because rage seeks rebellion. So the system gives them illusions, stories that soothe, rituals that calm, symbols that bring order to their emotional chaos. Elections, ceremonies, debates, public speeches. These are not merely political tools. They are emotional anesthetics. They prevent the crowd from tearing at the fabric of society every time fear touches their minds. Machiavelli understood that if a crowd is not directed, it becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is the enemy of stability. A leader does not control a crowd by force. He controls it by rhythm. Rhythm of hope, rhythm of fear, rhythm of reassurance, rhythm of illusion. He must learn when to speak and when to remain silent, when to show warmth and when to reveal coldness, when to appear strong and when to appear humble. The leader becomes a conductor of human emotion, not bending the crowd to his will, but bending his performance to the emotions the crowd already carries inside. Democracy depends on this performance, because without it, the crowd turns inward, fracturing into smaller, angrier groups, each convinced that they alone hold the unfiltered truth and therefore must impose it. Chaos is not created by a lack of power. Chaos is created by too many versions of power demanding to be heard at once. So illusions become necessary. Illusions that convince the crowd that their voice flows through a coherent channel. Illusions that make complexity appear manageable. Illusions that make disagreement feel noble instead of dangerous. The crowd must feel included, even when decisions are impossible to explain. They must feel respected, even when their desires contradict one another. They must feel empowered, even when their influence is symbolic rather than literal. This is why democracy performs transparency without ever exposing the machinery beneath it. To show everything would be to overwhelm the crowd. To overwhelm the crowd would be to destabilize society. And to destabilize society would be to break the illusion that holds it together. So the system speaks in a language designed to feel honest without revealing what honesty would truly demand. And the people accept this not because they are deceived, but because they prefer a comforting illusion over a truth that offers them no place to stand. Consider this. The crowd demands simplicity, but the world is not simple. The crowd demands fairness, but fairness cannot be perfectly engineered. The crowd demands equality, but equal desire does not create equal results. The crowd demands answers, but most answers are compromises stitched with uncertainty. So the system creates illusions that make these contradictions less painful. And the crowd protects these illusions because without them, they are naked before the cruelty of reality. Machiavelli would say the leader who fails to manage emotion will be devoured by it, because emotion is the true sovereign of democracy. It decides when the crowd praises. It decides when the crowd destroys. It decides when the crowd trusts and when the crowd abandons. A crowd can lift a leader higher than reason ever could, and it can drop him faster than logic ever would. This is why a leader must never believe he is loved. He must understand he is needed as a character in the illusion the crowd uses to explain their own fears. A leader is not chosen because he is strong. He is chosen because he fits the story the crowd needs at that moment. The moment that story changes, the crowd will search for a new illusion and a new leader to embody it. This is the brutal truth democracy hides. The crowd does not follow leaders. The crowd follows narratives. Leaders merely become vessels for whatever narrative comforts the masses during their current season of fear. And the leader who does not understand this will be replaced by someone who does. This is not cynicism. It is survival for leaders, for crowds, for democracy itself. A system built on emotion must master emotion or be swallowed by it. Equality is the most comforting illusion democracy has ever created. It soothes the mind. It softens resentment. It turns the vast inequalities of human nature into something emotionally digestible. But Machiavelli would tell you the truth no one wants to hear. People do not want equality. They want the feeling of equality, the story, the symbol. The illusion that protects them from admitting the brutal hierarchy nature has already written into the world. People are born unequal in desire, unequal in discipline, unequal in intelligence, unequal in temperament, unequal in fear. Equality exists nowhere in nature. Even the sun and moon do not shine the same. Yet democracy teaches the crowd an idea they need more than food, the belief that their voice matters as much as any other, not because it is true, but because without that belief, they would crumble beneath the weight of insignificance. A modern citizen does not crave fairness. He craves the comfort of imagining that fairness surrounds him. He needs to believe the system listens to him, even when the system is listening to millions of voices that contradict his own. Equality becomes a psychological shelter, a small, warm room where people hide from the coldness of reality. But here is the darker truth. Most people cannot handle actual equality. If everyone had equal influence, equal freedom, equal power, the world would collapse into conflict within days. Why? Because equality reveals difference, and difference breeds resentment. If every opinion mattered equally, chaos would multiply faster than unity. If every desire held equal weight, nothing could be decided at all. If every person had equal authority, society would become ungovernable. Equality is only bearable when diluted into illusion, when reshaped into a symbol rather than a mechanism. Machiavelli knew that the strongest societies are built not on equality, but on the illusion of equal belonging. the sense that everyone has a place, even if not everyone has power. People tolerate inequality as long as the system protects their dignity. Take away dignity, and they revolt. Preserve dignity through illusion, and they obey. Democracy must therefore practice a delicate balancing act. It must appear equal while functioning unequally. It must reward talent while pretending talent is universal. It must prioritize expertise while convincing the crowd that expertise belongs to everyone. This is not manipulation. This is what prevents collapse. Pure equality would paralyze society. Total inequality would ignite it. The illusion of equality, not too real, not too false, keeps the emotional temperature stable. The people need symbols of equality more than the substance of it. Ballots, town halls, public speeches, open debates. These rituals reassure the citizen that he is part of the structure, even if his true influence is small. Rituals calm the mind. Rituals create the impression of shared power. Rituals prevent resentment from evolving into rebellion. The danger comes when illusions weaken, when people begin noticing the cracks, when the story no longer matches their experience. If people start to believe that equality exists only on paper, the emotional foundation collapses. And once the illusion shatters, no leader can glue it together again. Because the crowd is not loyal to leaders, it is loyal to the illusion those leaders protect. This is why a democracy must always manage perception, not through censorship or control, but through the careful maintenance of symbolic fairness. Everyone must feel included. Everyone must feel represented. Everyone must feel that the system was designed with them in mind. Not because it is literally true, but because without that feeling, people lose the psychological anchor that keeps them from drifting into hopelessness or rage. Equality as a political mechanism is fragile. Equality as an emotional illusion is powerful. Citizens do not fight for perfect fairness. They fight for dignity, the dignity of believing their lives matter. And democracy understands this. It offers the illusion of equality as a balm, as a stabilizer, as a story that keeps the citizen from seeing the unbearable truth. Human beings are not equal in capacity, only in their need for meaning. And meaning is easier to distribute than power. So the system distributes meaning generously. It gives everyone a symbolic voice. It gives everyone a symbolic role. It gives everyone a symbolic influence. Because symbols are the only form of equality that the human mind can bear without breaking. This is why Machiavelli would warn, do not mistake the illusion for corruption. The illusion is protection. Without it, society would fall into a cold war of envy and despair. Equality is too heavy for humanity to carry. The illusion of equality is the bridge that keeps people walking forward without collapsing beneath the realization that they are not the authors of the world, but characters in a story written to keep them moving. And without that story, the crowd becomes uncontrollable. This is why democracy does not survive on truth. It survives on the illusions that people need, so they do not have to face the terrifying architecture of reality. Democracy presents itself as a stage lit from every angle, a place where decisions are made openly, voices are heard fairly, and power is visible to anyone willing to look. But Machiavelli would laugh softly at this idea, not out of cynicism, but out of understanding. Power is never where the light is. Power hides behind the glow. Power stands just beyond the edge of illumination, moving silently in the spaces the public rarely dares to look. Every society, no matter how modern, relies on the work of a shadow, a figure that people never fully see, though they often feel the effects of his decisions. This shadow is not a tyrant. He is not a villain. He is not even a single person. He is a role, a function, a necessity. He is the architect of the illusions that democracy must protect to prevent the people from tearing themselves apart. A society cannot survive without someone maintaining the emotional infrastructure. Not the legal structures, not the economic ones, but the psychological ones, the illusions that convince millions of conflicting desires to share the same fragile space. This is the shadow's burden. He must build the illusions that the crowd unconsciously demands. Hope even when outcomes are uncertain. Equality even when outcomes differ. Fairness even when circumstances are uneven. Unity even when the people do not share the same fears or dreams. He constructs the stories the public needs to believe that chaos is order, that compromise is virtue, that patience is noble, that participation is influence. He knows the truth behind these illusions. He knows how unstable the foundation truly is. He knows how deeply humans depend on comforting narratives to prevent their fear from becoming violence. And because he knows, he cannot afford to speak. Silence becomes his greatest tool, because silence allows the illusion to breathe, to grow, to settle gently over the minds of the people without ever revealing the hands that shaped it. A leader who explains too much exposes too much. A leader who reveals the machinery destroys the illusion that makes participation possible. A leader who speaks honestly about the complexity of decisions invites the crowd to drown in details their emotions cannot bear. So the shadow must speak in symbols, not explanations, metaphors instead of mechanisms, warm promises instead of cold specifics. He must appear transparent while showing almost nothing. He must appear accessible while keeping distance. He must appear fair while making decisions no crowd would ever approve. This is not hypocrisy. It is survival. Democracy cannot reveal its working parts, because its parts are incompatible with the emotional needs of the people. The people want clarity, but clarity exposes conflict. The people want simplicity, but simplicity hides compromise. The people want purity, but purity cannot govern complexity. So the shadow becomes the mediator between reality and expectation. He interprets the world for the people in a way that prevents them from collapsing under the weight of it. This is why Machiavelli insisted that the strongest leaders are not the loudest or the boldest. They are the ones who understand the emotional structure of power and move with the delicacy of someone holding a fragile instrument. Because the crowd is fragile, their illusions must be tended the way a caretaker tends fire. Too much oxygen and it burns out of control. Too little oxygen and it dies completely. The shadow must manage the temperature of belief. He must know when to raise hope and when to lower expectation, when to speak of unity and when to acknowledge division, when to promise a brighter path and when to warn of darker consequences. He becomes a sculptor of perception, a weaver of emotional order, a guardian of illusions that must survive for the system to remain coherent. Most people imagine power as force, but Machiavelli knew better. Real power is quiet. Real power is subtle. Real power is invisible. And real power does not seek applause, it seeks stability. The shadow does not ask for praise, because he understands praise is fickle. He does not ask for devotion, because devotion changes with the wind of public appetite. He does not ask for love, because love is temporary and fragile. He asks for one thing only, that the illusion remains intact. Because once the illusion breaks, the crowd will demand a level of truth they have no capacity to endure. People claim they want transparency, but transparency is the enemy of comfort. It reveals the chaos behind the curtain, the contradictions behind every decision, the emotional management required to make society functional at all. This is why the shadow must remain in the half-light, accessible enough to be trusted, distant enough to be protected. Too visible, and he becomes a target. Too invisible, and he becomes a myth. He must exist in a narrow corridor between presence and absence. Because democracy needs its illusions the way a body needs oxygen, quietly, constantly, unconsciously. The shadow understands this. He honors it. He protects it. He is not the enemy of truth. He is the boundary that prevents truth from destroying the structure. For every society that has collapsed under the weight of its own transparency, there is one that survived because someone protected its illusions. This is the darkness Machiavelli understood. A system does not endure because it is moral or pure or honest. It endures because someone carries the burden of keeping the truth out of the crowd's reach long enough for them to live their lives without drowning in fear. The shadow carries that burden, and most of the time, the people never even know his name. People imagine that illusions weaken a society. They imagine that lies corrode institutions, that deception destroys trust, that clarity is the highest form of progress. But Machiavelli understood the darker truth. It is not lies that destroy civilizations. It is truth. Truth revealed too quickly, too forcefully, too completely. Truth is volatile. Truth is sharp. Truth destabilizes the emotional equilibrium that keeps people civil. Truth strips away the narratives that allow ordinary lives to feel meaningful rather than accidental. People are not afraid of corruption. They are afraid of insignificance. They are afraid of being reminded that their voice is a whisper in a storm, that their influence is symbolic, that their part in the system is small. Democracy protects them from this fear by constructing illusions they can live inside, illusions of equality, illusions of empowerment, illusions of fairness, illusions of influence, illusions that soften the brutality of political reality into something the human mind can absorb without breaking. These illusions are not flaws. They are the architecture of stability. Imagine a world without them. A world where every citizen sees exactly how decisions are made, the contradictions, the compromises, the hidden deals, the emotional manipulation required to maintain balance. A world where every person sees the limits of their influence measured precisely, without comfort, without narrative, without hope. A world where complexity replaces simplicity, where uncertainty replaces belief, where raw truth replaces symbolic participation. Most people would not endure such a world. They would retreat into apathy or desperation, or something far darker. Machiavelli warned that when illusions collapse, crowds fracture. They split into tribes defined not by ideals, but by fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing identity. Fear of losing meaning. A society that loses its illusions does not become enlightened. It becomes violent. Without shared illusions, there can be no shared purpose. Without shared purpose, there can be no shared future. The illusion is not the enemy of truth. It is the vessel that makes truth survivable. This is why democracy must protect its fictions the way a body protects its organs. Not because people are stupid, but because people are fragile. Even the strongest minds need stories to give shape to the chaos of the world. Even the bravest hearts need symbols to make suffering feel noble. Even the wisest citizens need illusions to make their sacrifices feel meaningful. Without illusions, there is only the cold reality that the world is shaped by forces indifferent to human desire. And that is a reality humanity is not built to face every day. This is why illusions endure. They endure because they are emotionally necessary, psychologically necessary, civically necessary. The system does not hide truth out of malice. It hides truth because truth is combustible. A leader does not maintain illusions to deceive the people. He maintains illusions to protect them from the destructive potential of a world that refuses to bend to their expectations. People need illusions because they need meaning. They need stability. They need stories that make life feel coherent, even when it isn't. This is not manipulation. This is mercy. Human beings are storytellers. And democracy is the story they tell themselves to keep the abyss at a distance. The illusion is not the mask over reality. It is the bridge between reality and survival. Break the mask, and the bridge collapses with it. Preserve the mask, and the crowd continues to walk forward with dignity, with purpose, with hope. The truth does not bind society. Illusion does, not because it deceives, but because it holds. This is what Machiavelli understood with perfect clarity. People do not want to govern themselves. They want to believe they are governing themselves. They do not want equality. They want the feeling of equality. They do not want complete truth. They want truth softened into meaning. And democracy gives them that meaning, so they do not have to face the unbearable architecture of how the world truly works. Illusions are not the price of democracy. Illusions are the foundation of democracy. They are the invisible pillars holding up the fragile roof under which the crowd gathers, day after day, whispering the same comforting story. We are free. You have now seen the machinery that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You have walked through the shadows where the illusions are shaped, refined, protected. You have seen the crowd not as it appears, but as it behaves. You have seen equality not as a principle, but as a psychological shield. You have seen leaders not as heroes, but as caretakers of the illusions the people need to survive. You have seen democracy not as a beacon of truth, but as a delicate story told to millions so they can endure the weight of existence without collapsing beneath it. You now stand where Machiavelli once stood, on the edge of the curtain, peering into the dim machinery behind it. And once you see this world, you cannot unsee it. The illusions that comfort others will never comfort you again. The stories that keep the crowd calm will feel like stagecraft. The symbols that inspire them will feel hollow. The rituals that reassure them will feel like choreography performed for stability. But there is a strange liberation in this. When you stop expecting truth from systems that were never built to deliver it, you stop feeling betrayed by them. You stop searching for purity in structures designed to manage contradiction. You stop waiting for systems to reflect the complexity of your mind and instead acknowledge that they exist to manage the emotions of millions. This is the clarity Machiavelli offered, a clarity denied to most, clarity too heavy for the crowd, a clarity only a few dare to carry. If you have reached the end of this journey, then you have already shown that you can carry truths that others cannot. But awareness is not a destination. It is a beginning. So stay with us. Keep seeing. Keep learning. Keep sharpening the one weapon the world cannot take from you: perception. This is more than a channel. It is a refuge for those who see the world as it is, not as it pretends to be.